Hello and welcome everyone. We're now back after a little break and are continuing our series of interviews with leading innovation experts. This time we're interviewing Mikel Mangold on the power of networks and innovation ecosystems. Mikel is a chemist by training and has previously worked to drive innovation for pharma and health companies. He's currently leading the EMEA Innovation Ecosystem Strategy at the Venture Lab of NGK Sparkplug, a business creation and investment hub with a $100 million fund, which is establishing new revenue streams for the company in mobility, utilities, and medical. But with that, I'll hand it over to you, Mikael. So could you tell our listeners a little more about yourself and your background?
Thank you very much, Jess, for the interview. I'm excited for this conversation. So my name is Mikel Mangold, and I am a chemist by training. So that's will it say how it started. I'm French German, and very early on, I was able to move through different environments. I've studied in 4 different countries. I've traveled and took several breaks, met cultures across continents. And I was in the Silicon Valley, and at that time, I worked for an incubator's accelerator. I learned from very successful people. I got mentored by top VCs and I would say 30 plus years experience corporate individuals. And so now I'm back in Europe and I'm trying to really create a lot of change. So if you have to define me as I'm trying to change the mindset of people, change the call of people, and I want to create positive change in the world. And I believe in the power of networks to do so. So that's how I would describe myself as of now.
Awesome. Thanks. Um, you also just became a published author, I wanted to kick off the conversation with that. So can you tell a little bit about what your book is about in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, this book is about highlighting the need for most of us to change, but not just because it's nice to change, like some people would like to, create change. It's because we have a necessity to change for everybody, for corporates to survive, for individuals to feel fulfilled and purposely driven in their lives, and we need to change because we have a lot of problems to solve. And the current way of working will not help them to solve large systemic issues. And my book is basically inspired by Silicon Valley.
Mhm.
If you look at the data, they are not just the best; they are 10x the best in terms of startups and innovation compared to the rest of the world. It's $1 trillion economy, and I'm comparing it also with Europe. Why is it so different here? So I'm collecting data about uh, this big difference, and then I'm advising that it's about the mindset, and I highlight 7 mindset principles inspired by my interviews. Interview 20 people, data, and my personal insights on what are the mindset principles that individuals need to adopt to build networks. What are networks? Networks, for me, I divide them in 3 categories in the book. Number one, it's all about a network for ideas and knowledge. It's to improve yourself in your research, in your innovation, in this huge company idea that you always had, and it's through accessing to the network that you're gonna get the best one. The second network that I'm talking about in the book, it's about resources. We all know it. We need money, but we don't not just need money. Some will need infrastructure. Some will need IP and legal services. Some will need production facilities. And so to really have an impact on the world and to implement an ideas up to the market, usually you need all of these relationships. And the last one, the network, is especially now is a network of people. Um,
Mm.
and that can be volunteers, full time people that just want to support you in whatever you're doing. So how do you build that network of people around you that are going to support you to create the change that you imagine? So that's the book in a nutshell. With
Mhm.
the whole purpose is waking up and making people realize that we need to change, that they can succeed and thrive in this fast changing world, to solve complex problems and systemic issues.
the people who are listening to this, most of them are corporate innovators such as yourself. So I wanted to dive deeper in the why part of it. So why is it so important for us to really network and to be good at it to drive that change for our organizations?
Yes, I'm very happy to highlight a few things. So especially for corporate innovator. Let me start with the issue that I'm observing myself, and I believe it will be supported by a lot of listeners. We work in silos. And even if some new innovation teams talk about agile and cross-functional and so on, which is still, I would say, for most people, even not new. But for most corporate innovators, this is kind of well known. However, believe me, I still observe a huge siloed approach to innovation, which is, or let's work in our team, and they don't really interact much with the external world. And
Yeah.
this is for me something that I don't understand. And there have been more than a dozen studies on this. There is a study called ATP combination. You can check it out. And basically what this study is showing, I think it was Brian Uzi. Brian Uzi is the author of the study. And he studied all the innovators, all these people, and he realized that all of the best innovators, the best people that are creating changes because they were able to create this network with people, and they were also cross-disciplinary, talking to different departments and different,
Yeah.
companies, and gathering those insights was making the people the best innovators. There's another study that is called the Global Theory of Intellectual Change. They studied 200,000 years, like philosophers, mathematicians, um, people that really made an impact somehow on the IP
Mhm.
level, intellectual. And it's the same. It was the people that had access to a lot of other people that were creating exchanges, and that were the best. And so you have these studies, and there was even another one that I want to cite in regarding scientists, because I am a scientist. And there
Yeah.
was a guy, he was asking scientists, what made you discover this discovery? And usually they were saying, oh, in the lab there was this and so on, right? So what he did is like, okay, they're all telling me this, but I don't, there's something that I'm not sure about. So he put cameras in the lab, and he tried to observe the scientist. And
Right.
what ended up happening, he realized, is that the one that were making discoveries were the one that were interacting the most with other scientists,
Mm.
and also they had fruitful conversation in the conference room. So what it meant, it was so much more about your ability to talk, exchange with your environment and people and network, that were making you actually a better innovator, a better person. So for corporate innovators, why it is so important is because we all know that it's all about the feedback loop system, especially for products, maybe hardware and with some features, maybe digital
Yeah.
a little bit. It's a bit different, and I will not go too much into digital technologies as I am a scientist and more of a system person. But it's all about feedback loop. It's all about how do you get validated ideas, how do you get good ideas, how do you get to what people want, and even if you have a few tools and processes, you can landing page and so on. I mean, at the end of the day, it's so much more about, can you ask experts? Can you ask customers? Can you ask your friend and your colleague and whatever it is, to really get these insights from everybody? So the people that have large networks and extensive,
Mhm.
individuals they can reach out to will be the one that have an unfair advantage in that space, especially.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really interesting and a great point that we also really like to highlight with a lot of our customers as well. So um, often there's a bit of a too much emphasis on the actual idea that people are working on instead of putting in the work of actually refining that, because the original idea, like it's never going to be enough. So you really need to work on improving that, and the feedback from other people is crucial in getting that. So getting the word out, getting valuable feedback, iterating and validating the idea. A lot of that just requires input from other people, and networks are a great way to achieve that.
Yeah, and let me add one thing actually, because
Hmm.
there is a Venn diagram that I'm talking about in the book. And what I see right now in the corporate world is a huge emphasis of processes, like, oh, that's all the tools you can use to innovate.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, here is a book, and then you have like, I mean, you know all these tools, right?
Hmm.
But what I realize is that the people that really create change, sometimes they didn't even know all these tools. I mean, a lot of startups I know, they didn't use any of that. And
Yeah.
what they did is they had the mindset and the networks, and then
Hmm.
they had like this deep passion about solving one specific problem, and that's how they made it happen, and they just learn along the way. But what most people have are the processes, tools, and education. But what most of us are lacking is actually the mindset and the networks, and the combination of the three. When you have the three, that's when you can really create change.
Given the background that this is so important, what can we actually do on the day-to-day job? How can we get started in building more and better networks? And should we kind of like just start with colleagues within our own organization, or go broader than that? How do you suggest we would approach that?
Yes. So one, when I say about building networks, it's so much about the mind, and it's about, I would say, an art of living and a state of being. It's about on realizing that it's so much about the people surrounding you. So once people acknowledge that and realize that, then it should be like an everyday job to always interact with the people, always be curious. But if I can be practical, well, you first actually build networks, for me, when you have a deep sense of self-awareness. So, what do you want to solve? What are you passionate about? And when you first identify that, you can ask the right questions. You're going to be curious. You're going to be, engaged in conversation. And usually, this attract a lot of people to you because they're fascinated by your, I would say, your sense of belonging to a specific topic and so on. And so then people just come to you. Once you
Yeah.
identify your problem and you're really obsessed about it, and if I can, maybe it's about water purification, maybe it's about solving elderly people falling because your grandma just like kind of don't broke their legs. Maybe it's about stopping people to take opioids in the US. Maybe it's about helping people to eat healthy, but like they don't lose time cooking, and then you find the solution around whatever it is. Maybe it's about cosmetics, that you don't want cosmetics coming from oil, and then you find a cheap version but it's still healthy. There's a lot
Yeah.
of problems, so finding the problem that you're completely obsessed about, and then the how comes later. It's really about the I would say the why, and then first the what, then the why, and then the how comes later. And the how, if you have a network, is so much easier than the all, what people think about. So first, that's really number one. And the second one is, how do you build
Right.
networks? So that was my principle number one, is like, do it
Hmm.
yourself, and you do it yourself by building that self-awareness, and by then telling the story, about why, what is the journey that you want people to go into with you. And when you can do that, and there's several ways, I don't want to go into details, but storytelling. Then the second one is, really one, I believe, is extremely important, is cross borders, blow up borders. And what I mean by that is changing department, changing the company, changing the discipline. Go out in a meetup that is not related to your activities.
Yeah.
Talk to the guy you don't think is valuable. Talk, go, and then if you can, like, go broad, like, change your culture, change the continent, anything that will really expose yourself to multidisciplinary, activities, is going to be extremely helpful to build networks. And I'm giving an example of Carl Gervasi in my book. So Carl Gervasi is the founder of the birth pill. He grew up in the Nazi time, and he escaped. He was coming from Austria, and then he was moved to Bulgaria, and then to the US. And then to the
Yeah.
US, he didn't fit with the system, switched into university, academia, went back to university, and then at the end he launched like several companies, and then at the end he was also an author, an artist, and so on. And what he was saying is that it's through these different experiences that was bringing back to the best ideas. So multidisciplinary is extremely important.
Yeah.
Another way to build networks, and that's what, believe me, is one of the one that people are really behind, is the ability to give without asking something. And that's something, statistics out there. I think we are like in the 70 to 90% range of takers.
Mm.
And this has been traditionally normal.
Yeah.
Companies were always transactional. It was about, okay, you give, you get. Your salary was the same. Is I give you a job, you do. But today we live in a different world. Today we live in a world of caring, and it is also in a job, on the job basis with your boss. It's not about you do and I do. And
Mm.
the hierarchy are getting flat, so it means everybody should be careful with each other. And then in the startup world, in the ecosystem world, it's about helping others, because entrepreneurs, they will never have enough return that they can provide you. Usually they're starting, they don't have money. So
Yeah.
you cannot just ask, waiting on shares every time you talk to an entrepreneurs. You cannot always, trying to get something. So it's all about how can I help that person? And
Mm.
anywhere on the ecosystem there should be, it's about helping that person. And that's actually a mantra by Brad Feld, the founder of Techstar. Give
Yeah.
first. And that's also something that I'm trying to push, because believe me, this is really, really something we are behind on. And I see it absolutely every day in calls and in meetups. Last week I was at VivaTech. I was talking to a guy, and he was wanting me to make this introduction. And then he said, "Oh, I give you a call next week. We can establish a contract." And I was like, "No, we don't do this." Like, I, and so that's kind of the mindset that I'm trying to change. And there's a few more insights in the book, and I don't want to be too long here, but
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
direction it's going.
Yeah, those are two great tips, so to really think about, like just diving in and starting to work on something, and then working with other people on the same topic, and then focusing on giving first. So great tips. Um, I want to transition to innovation ecosystems more
Yep.
broadly. It's obviously a term that's pretty hot right now. A lot of people are talking about it, but it seems that most people have a slightly different take on what it means, and why corporations actually need to build one. So, what's your take on the topic, and kind of how do you see innovation ecosystems, and why is it important for companies to be working on creating one, or is
Yes.
it?
So is it? Yes. So let me start by talking. Why are we talking about innovation ecosystem? So we live now in a very interesting time, and if you look, there is a MIT and Capgemini studies that were showing that in 2015, only 4% of corporations were using startups for their innovation activities. So
Yeah.
maybe it was 4%. This is absolutely nothing. And that's surveyed 320 global companies. That number will increase to 40% by 2025. And innovation labs will count by 70% of the innovation activities by 2025. If you look at 20 years ago, it was just R&D. So basically what it meant is that you had almost no interaction with the outside world um, 10 to 20 years ago. You
Yeah.
just didn't have that. The future looks different. The future looks that almost all of your transformation capabilities will be external. And if you look at just that fact, you already have the answer to your question. Do you need to be
Right.
engaged with the innovation ecosystem? Well, if you don't, you can say bye to your transformation. You can say bye to your innovation, because you
Yeah.
won't get access to new technologies, IP, so on. So yes, why? Because that's the future. Why do we do external innovation? Is because we live in a very fast changing world, and digital technology specifically are accelerating the way we implement new things on the market. And because of that, companies cannot do it on their own. Like they could, but it could take too long. And so to speed it up, there is no other way than to partner and invest in external companies. So that's the why they should. Now, what is an innovation ecosystem? And I think this is very important to highlight. I talk to a lot of people, and even I don't want to cite names, but top management, and they don't understand innovation ecosystem. They only see startups,
Yeah.
right? And startups is a huge focus. And I've talked to a few, and apparently it's really the case for a lot of companies. The top management is not only talking about startups. However, I worked with a global expert in innovation ecosystem. Her name is Sue Bannister. She was the former CEO of $1 billion fund in Boston, Massachusetts. And she was leading this innovation ecosystem transformation in Boston. So what is it? It is when you have a thriving and a functioning innovation ecosystem, and I'm starting with the result, you get sustainable innovation, like the fact that you can have new innovation over again, and it just keep going, right? And how do you she called that innovation capacity. So how do you create that? It's, well, you need all the different parts of the ecosystem. In healthcare, it means having all mature companies, startups, top universities, production facilities, scale up manufacturing. You have accelerators, incubator spaces to host all these people. And then you have all the, like I would say, service-based organizations, CRO, legal, whatsoever. And then, of course, in the medical space, you need medical centers. You know it, right? Like
Yeah.
it can be UCSF if it's San
Mm-hmm.
Francisco, and so on and so on. And so you need all the pieces that are all in the same space. Today we can talk about global, digital, but let's stay still with the current version of innovation ecosystem, which is local.
Yeah.
And you need all these different entities in the ecosystem. So first, does your region, does your city has one? That's the first questions. And once you have it, identify all the players in the ecosystem. And I can tell you, we just moved to Berlin in Germany, our team, and most of the team have no idea about all the players, have no idea about who is in the space, where are the medical centers, how many, where are the incubators, accelerators. So that first step is to identify who is in the innovation ecosystem. And now it's like, how do you engage and why do you do this? So the why is already explained. Why is because otherwise you will not access to the latest information. And it's not just about startups. So companies should engage on multiple levels here. They
Yeah.
should scout startups, yes, but they should help startups as well, which means sometimes it's through grant programs, sometimes it's through, you organize these kind of events together with like the city and you try to promote entrepreneurship. Sometimes it's through education. If you want to have to work in a strong ecosystem, well, then you can also participate in the education or transformation of that ecosystem. If you look in San Francisco, you have Genentech that is sponsoring like this biotech week, and they're inviting a lot of students. You have SAP that is funding SAP AO coding initiative, and where you
Yeah.
have all these little kids that are coding. And so your companies have more of a, something to play than it was before. It's not just about the government that is setting up entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
Entrepreneurship should be set by companies and all the players, universities, medical centers, and so on. And
Mm-hmm.
strong and powerful innovation ecosystem is when you create an environment where entrepreneurs can start a company because they're going to have access to capital. They can grow a company, they can scale a company, and they want to stay in the innovation ecosystem. This is important because successful ecosystems are made by usually serial entrepreneur that reinvest in the community.
Yeah.
And so creating that environment, and I will stop here.
Uh, cool. Cool. And if I dive into a little more detail on that, so would you say that like as a company, if you're looking into that, should you have the same mindset of giving first to the ecosystem before expecting like meaningful results, or how do you think about that? Because that's a topic that we often come across is like you need to have some kind of a measurable business case for investing in the ecosystem. So what's your take on that?
Yes. So it's I don't believe in the all or nothing, and to me, it's a bit narrow-minded to say or if I give, I will not produce my business results. So I believe you can do both. And it is extremely true that all the innovation units should not be innovation theaters as we know it, and it's been a famous term in the space. And why is this? Is because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people were like doing fancy pictures, and also they had fancy offices.
Yeah.
And 3 years later, it got shut down because you got no business results. So
Yeah.
that's the issue that I think we're talking about also. Well, I believe that the number one KPI, and there's no question about it, is show how do you increase revenue for your company because you stay a company. Um, but it doesn't mean that the company and the group cannot participate in such program. And it can be also not maybe by the innovation team, right? The innovation team has to be extremely focused on build, having to sustain tangible results, which is building ventures or investing in startups or whatever. But the company overall should play a role here, and it can be another unit. Maybe it's like the culture unit of the organization that is trying to participate with the innovation team and ask, well, what can we do about it? Um, there's just the fact that it's the time where you just get, even for businesses, is over. And there's a good book about the whole concept of providing value to society by Net Positive by Paul I think Hoffman, and
Mm-hmm.
he was the CEO of Unilever, and he was telling all the initiative they were doing to the community, and so that's kind of the things that I believe companies should
Yeah.
do. And I'm not going to lie, I don't feel my company is doing enough. And we we have great companies like Patagonia, while Unilever and others that they're doing just a lot, and that's why we need to. And for building innovation ecosystem, it should be all about helping entrepreneurs.
Cool. Cool. If we then look at the side of like helping an organization build an innovation ecosystem, that's obviously something you've seen others do, and that you're working yourself on. Do any best practices come to mind that would be important to keep in mind, like during the process, or?
Yes. So I believe what is important is, I'm talking about it also in the book. It was the last chapter is have skin in the game. So what it means having skin in the game in a business term, and it is, well, you when you really put your own money into it.
Yeah.
And I interviewed someone, and now I will go a little bit outside. It was real estate. Yes, it's not the same, but what he did and what he's doing is he's building huge complexes that are worth like hundreds of millions. And he said that when he started a project, he always own more than half of the risk. And so he's going to put his money and just really create that credibility and reliability. And when you have your first project, then you create this network of people around you to help, and all the co-investor. And then you do second project, they're all showing up again, and then you do the other one, they're all showing up again. So honestly, it's exactly the same, I would say, in the business world. Imagine you do your first initiative, you put your own money in it, you sponsor an event, you
Yeah.
do it, and then you just show the example, and then you just do it a multiple amount of times, and it will create an incredible brand and reputation into the ecosystem. And so by building, like taking the risk, taking the initiative, um, it can be incredible. And what are the best practices? So first, don't wait that everybody's doing it to do it. And I always go crazy about this. We don't always need to be followers, but usually this is, they want data that others have done it. Um, but also best practices is just build connections with all the elements of the ecosystem. So what I'm saying is there are not, of course, most cities have public-private organizations. Um, in Berlin, it's Berlin Partner. In Basel, Switzerland's business area and innovation, or something like that. In Boston is the Massachusetts Life Science Center. In Los Angeles for life sciences is called Biotech LA, Bioscience LA. I apologize. In San Francisco, you have a biomanufacturing network for biotech as well. And I was very involved with healthcare. Um, And so first, the first step, to be honest, is to go to this organization, because this organization, their money is they get usually funded by the government, but it's semi-private, so they get it from banks and so on. And the whole goal of this organization is to help you
Mm.
participate and to connect in the ecosystem. So I would say that would be the first step. And then you can just connect with accelerators, incubators, say that you're interested to connect with them. Usually they share the startups, or they're going to invite you to demo days. You can
Yeah.
participate and co-organize and sponsor these events. So you're helping these accelerators to thrive and have more entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
You can go to a lot of meetups. San Francisco, what I was realizing is they had an incredible meetup culture. And it was, people say, oh, yeah, we also have events. Yes, you have events, but you have like 2 events a week or whatever it is. They had 50 a day, and it was in a 800,000 city. So
Yeah.
you can, and it was inclusive. It was open to everybody. It was
Yeah.
not like invite only, or you have to pay €1,000 to go. It was completely different. It was free, sponsored by one of the companies. So it was
Yeah.
really helping people to connect and exchange. So I would say event going to this, public-private organization that had a backbone organization for the ecosystem, helping accelerators, incubators to thrive, maybe by sponsoring, by attending, by promoting the activities, and then once you identify, right, it comes back to identifying the players. Just make interaction with all of them, and if you are an investor of like us, we are CVC. You have to build connections with other investors, because what
Yeah.
I realize is that all of them are interested for co-investment. They never go
Hmm.
in a deal alone. And so it's very helpful to build out this relationship, starting to share deals. And then when a deal is coming, that you can co-invest as a community, I would say so.
Yeah.
And that helps to the ecosystem, because more investment will be made in the ecosystem and so on. So that's what I would say, really building this relationship and trying to find a way to collaborate.
I wanted to hear your thoughts on that. So can you first share like what the differences between the two are in the mindset, and then then perhaps touch a little bit about like what the perhaps the challenges in doing corporate venture capital right are.
Yes. No, I'm happy to share about it, with the disclosure that while I'm not making the investment per se for my company, so I work with the investment team, and the investment team have their own processes, and I participate, and I would say I recommend startups because I'm scouting.
Yeah.
But the high level decision obviously are not made by myself. So let me explain a little bit my experience so far. And I would start with the VC culture in Silicon Valley. So first, the VC culture in Silicon Valley is another game than the VC culture now here. They take the most risk. They invest in crazy companies. They fail a lot, but they are asking for moonshots. They want $1 billion opportunity, and they are going to really do crazy bets. And the whole purpose often is, well, it's ROI, it's return on investment, and they want to be, I would say, to really have an interesting portfolio, resilient portfolio, but it's really having a lot of return in terms of money. And and that's why they are the most successful one, is because they take the most risk, and they're also losing a lot of money. But one deal out of 100 that becomes like a world leading company is like saving all of your failures. And that's
Yeah.
why Sequoia Capital has backed Google and all these companies. So that's the VC culture in the Silicon Valley. Now, if you look at CVC, it's a completely different approach. My understanding with our funds, and I believe it is also the purpose of most CVC, you don't just look at return on investment. You don't just look at money. You don't just, and you will definitely by far not take the most risk. I mean, that's not part of corporate. Um, what companies are trying to do, in my understanding, they are trying to transform themselves to let's say have the capabilities and the technology that will be relevant in 10 years from now. And so the technology is very important, and the IP is even more important. So what are the kind of patents you can acquire? What are kind of, these kind of things, and the markets. So are they in the markets they are not implemented? well, they know they have to increase the market share. So they will invest in companies that can go into new markets, that can acquire new technologies, including the IP, and that will help them transform and be relevant in 10 years from now. So that's my understanding of corporate venture capital. And they don't really do it. They do it for the money, of course, but usually they will actually lose money in the short term. But it's
Yeah.
really to really have this competitive advantage 10 years from now. And again, why is it a trending topic? Why is it relevant today? Is because while every company has now technologies that will not be relevant 10 years from now, especially because a lot of these companies do not have digital products, and digital connected products are like the future. And so they will need to do that because employees, most of them are not really into these new technologies neither. So the only way you can do it fast is to really acquire or invest in this novel company. So that's really the two different aspects of both. And if I can jump, what are the difficulties of corporate venture capital? Well, it's also, I would say, it starts with the people you recruit to do the CVC fund. And I was talking to a large company, also like I would say it was $3 or $4 billion in size in sales, and were global companies. It was a chemical company, and they said that they were recruiting for 1 year top investors that will lead the fund. And they had already some people, but they needed that kind of VC. And
Yeah.
and so this is extremely hard for companies to hire these people that have experience in venture capital, that know the game, and that could lead this portfolio initiative. And if you're not like Google or like very very famous brands, um,
Yeah.
the VC, why would they join you? I mean, just put in their spot. If they can do it by themselves, they will make so much more money.
Yeah.
Why would they join a company that is often much more rigid? Like it's so much about strategy, and you cannot really invest in the company you like. It's
Yeah.
about it's quite a rigid. We want this technology, this,
Mm.
and then you also have I would say a lot of consensus and alignment, top management, a lot of, so you move slower, you have a lot of roadblocks, you're not free in terms of investments, and depending on the industry, and it worse it gets, and for yourself usually you can be much more successful outside. And so companies are struggling to get these top people, and then if you don't get the right people, then probably you don't do the right investment. So there are the two models. First one is the best, but if you don't get the people, usually you don't produce tangible results. And the other one is a very hard because it's a conflict of, I would say, vision,
Yeah.
and the way of working. And last comments that I want to say is there have been a McKinsey study recently about M&A and so on, and they were saying that it is the most efficient strategy to transform a company, but it was only working if companies were investing, I would say, almost on a quarterly basis, so on a kind of time bonded investment basis. And it's not like you always wait for the best deals. So it's just you
Mm.
keep doing it, you keep investing, and you do it for a period of time. And so you will have failures, but you that's kind of the was the most effective M&A way of doing it.
I know you're also passionate about what the World Economic Forum calls the Great Reset. So, what is it for those of us that are unfamiliar with the term, and what's your take on it? Why is this such a pivotal opportunity for us as a society?
Yes. So one of the interesting quote that I heard was 2 days ago for an event that I was actually moderating, and it was an executive vice president of a startup unicorn, and he said the quote, "Never miss a good crisis." Right, and actually, we have heard that from many, I would say, entrepreneurs, that sometimes, and actually often, the best companies are born in a crisis, right?
Yeah.
Uber, Airbnb, all these companies were born in 2008 crisis, and many companies were born in the internet bubble crisis, and so it starts like this. And right now we really face a huge crisis. What is the crisis? Is we run on an economic model that is really damaging our world. And it is what it is, and it won't change if we continue the way we work. And one of the biggest issues is that we still run on this kind of quarterly basis where companies get bonuses and boards get bonuses, and it's all about shareholders. So what you do is you're very short term. You always think short term. You think,
Yeah.
how can you get this like profit base to increase your stock, to report on the quarterly, everything is fine. And then usually also if you're on a board, you're in 3 years, you get your bonus. So why would you think more than 3 years ahead?
Yeah.
So Paul, that is writing this book on Net Positive, he is talking about the multi-stakeholder economy, and that we should remove quarterly reporters, and we should be much more stakeholder driven. Is making sure that all our stakeholders involved with our company are doing well, thinking long term, and stopping what is called shareholder supremacy. So it's a new approach that has been already around for 80 like since the 80s. And the founder executive chairman of the World Economic Forum has written an entire book about it. And it's really about that you care about all the stakeholders of your company. You care about your suppliers. You care about the one that are producing the thing, the one that are going to the logistics, the one that, and you end up this all cost saving absolutely everywhere to just have the maximum returns at every quarterly report,
Yeah.
just to get this shareholder appreciation and value. And so there is a very strong need to stop that, and and it will happen because companies are going to be forced to do that. And then last but not least, everybody's watching. So if the companies are not doing it right, today we have the empower where it's called internet, and believe me, like the companies will be on the spot.
Yeah.
And that's been shown with Disney when they wanted to film something in the China in a region where you had I would say almost kind of a Nazification, and they were heavily criticized. You have like we hear that right now, Elon Musk and so on. Everything is doing something. It's all around the news. You hear that. So every company that is not doing what is right, they will be pointed out, and
Yeah.
it can completely destroy the actual value. Right now with Russia, we've seen as well. So the
Mhm.
message is: do what is right, think long term, stop short term profits, and take care of all your stakeholders.
Yeah.
And like this, the whole society will be better. We can start to solve problems, and we will also build innovation ecosystems.
Mhm. Awesome. Any closing thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Well, my closing thought is we actually live in a very, very interesting time. And the opportunity is that anywhere you are, any position you have, any knowledge you possess, you can today build networks easily, I would say, through digital technologies to create a positive change. And this opportunity has never been like 10, even 10 years ago was not possible.
Mm.
And so my message is that everybody should be aware of this incredible change that we have, and realizing that it's so much more about bottom up today and networks than any kind of power money thing. And through social media, through digital technologies, to just sharing what you believe in, um, a lot is possible. And this is really an opportunity. And I hope people listening will realize that we can create positive change, and it's not impossible if we join forces.
Awesome. That's the perfect note to end our discussion on. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your experiences and thoughts with us and our audience, Michael.
Thank you, Jesse.